Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're your shortcut to getting smart fast on the big issues. And today, we are diving straight into a really high stakes legal fight. It's all about birthright citizenship here in the United States. Our mission, as always, is to pull out the absolute key takeaways, the crucial facts, the surprising bits, so you get the whole picture without wading through everything yourself. And look, we have to kick off with something that just happened. A U.S. Supreme Court ruling dropped on June 28th, 2025. Now, okay, it wasn't directly deciding on birthright citizenship itself. That's important. But, and this is the key part, it massively changes how people can legally challenge policies like, say, an attempt to end birthright citizenship.
Yep.
Okay, let's unpack this. This isn't just dry legal stuff. It's actually, well, it opens up a really surprising angle on something pretty fundamental to being American.
Absolutely. And what's so interesting here is how a ruling that seems purely procedural, just about how judges operate, connects directly to something as well as core as American identity. It really throws a spotlight on how these foundational ideas hold up, when faced with these new kinds of challenges.
That's a great way to put it. So let's get into the details of this June 28th ruling. Essentially, the Supreme Court put limits on the power of federal judges to issue something called nationwide injunctions. Think of it like a single judge hitting a giant pause button that stops a federal policy everywhere, coast to coast. And these injunctions, they were exactly what lower courts had used to block President Donald Trump's executive order, the one aiming to, well, end birthright citizenship for certain groups.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the crucial bit, the nuance. The justices did not rule on whether Trump's order itself was constitutional or not. That wasn't the question before them. Their focus was really narrow, just on the scope of one single judge's power. How far can one ruling reach?
Right. It's about the reach of the remedy, not the legality of the underlying policy in this specific decision.
Exactly. So the immediate effect is that those earlier challenges to Trump's order, they're being sent back down, back to the lower courts to look at again. But, and this is also key right now, the policy itself, the order trying to deny birthright citizenship, it remains blocked, at least for now.
Okay, so to really get why that procedural shift is such a big deal, we probably need to step back. Look at the history, the constitutional basis for birthright citizenship. So at its core, it's this principle. Anyone born on U.S. soil is automatically a citizen. Simple as that. Doesn't matter if the parents have legal status or not.
Right. Born here, you're a citizen.
And this isn't, some recent idea. It comes directly from the 14th Amendment, ratified way back after the Civil War.
Yeah.
And its specific goal, its primary intent was crystal clear. Guarantee citizenship for people who had been enslaved. It was meant to be transformative.
A huge historical moment.
Definitely. And then you have this landmark Supreme Court case from 1898, United States v. Wong Kim-ark. Wong Kim-ark, he was born in San Francisco. His parents were Chinese immigrants. He took a trip abroad, and when he tried to come back, they denied him re-entry. Said he wasn't a citizen, but the Supreme Court ruled in his favor. They said, nope, he's a citizen because he was born here. It solidified that idea.
Mm-hmm.
Birthplace, not who your parents are, determines citizenship under the 14th Amendment. And that precedent, well, it stood for over 100 years.
Okay, so that's the bedrock. Over a century of practice rooted in the 14th Amendment and confirmed by the Supreme Court. But this established principle is exactly what President Trump challenged. Back in January, he signed that executive order. Its aim was to deny citizenship to children born in the U.S. if their parents were undocumented immigrants or here on temporary visas. And his argument, it all hangs on this one phrase in the 14th Amendment, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Now, traditionally, that's understood to mean basically anyone present in the U.S. and subject to its laws, except for, say, diplomats. But the argument Trump's team makes is different. They claim it excludes children of undocumented immigrants, arguing their parents aren't fully subject to the jurisdiction because of their immigration status.
It's a controversial interpretation, to say the least.
Very. And multiple federal judges have pushed back hard. They've flat out rejected this reading as unconstitutional. You had Judge John Coffiner in Seattle who just called it, quote, a blatantly unconstitutional order. Pretty direct. And Judge Deborah Boardman in Maryland said something similar, basically stating that no court has ever backed Trump's interpretation of that phrase.
Right. The lower courts were quite clear on the substance.
So given that strong pushback on the actual constitutional question, let's circle back to what the Supreme Court just did on June 28th. Help us understand the strategic play here.
Okay, yeah, it's critical to be precise. The Supreme Court did not rule for or against birthright citizenship itself in this June 28th decision. They didn't touch the merits of Trump's order. What Trump's legal team challenged was the tool used to block the order, those nationwide injunctions. the scope of the judge's power. And
Yeah.
on that specific procedural point, they won.
Ah, okay. So it was a win on procedure, not substance.
Exactly. They didn't get a green light for the policy itself, but they successfully challenged how it was being blocked nationwide by single judges. So this kind of changes the battlefield. Instead of one judge stopping it everywhere, the fight goes back to individual courts. They have to reassess based on these new rules about injunctions, which means, yes, the order is still blocked for at least another 30 days while this gets sorted out in lower courts, but the overall legal path forward is, well, it's different now. More complicated, perhaps.
Right. The path forward is definitely less clear. So, what are people doing now? What's the immediate response from legal advocates fighting against the order?
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. Almost immediately, like within hours of the Supreme Court ruling, 2 new lawsuits were filed. Class action lawsuits, one in Maryland, one in New Hampshire.
Shifting tactics.
Exactly. Their new strategy seems to be using a different legal tool. Not a nationwide injunction, but trying for class certification. That means asking the court to recognize a whole group, a class of people affected by the policy, like all children born in the U.S. to certain immigrant parents after the order. If they get class certification, a ruling for that class could effectively block the order for everyone in that defined group. It's powerful, maybe harder to get than an injunction, but still a way to achieve broad impact.
So a different route to potentially achieve a similar outcome, but maybe state by state or circuit by circuit initially, depending on how the class is defined and certified.
Yeah.
It seems like it. And it's worth noting, even within the Supreme Court, there was strong disagreement on this procedural ruling. Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote a dissent. She urged the lower courts to act fast, and she called Trump's citizenship order itself, quote, blatantly unlawful and harmful. Strong words from a justice.
Highlighting the tension between the procedural ruling and the underlying substantive concerns.
Absolutely. And immigrant rights groups are definitely sounding the alarm. Krisha Tomara Vignaraja, who heads Global Refuge, put it pretty starkly. She said, quote, by denying lower courts the ability to enforce that right uniformly, the court has invited chaos, inequality, and fear.
That points to the potential real-world consequences of having different rules apply in different places, even temporarily.
Chaos, inequality, fear. That's quite the warning. So summing up where we are right this minute, Trump's order trying to limit birthright citizenship, still on hold, blocked. But the legal ground has shifted. The nationwide protection offered by those earlier injunctions is gone, replaced by new lawsuits seeking class action status. Its future feels, well, a lot more up in the air.
It really does. And it underscores how something that seems settled, law birthright citizenship, established for over 125 years based on the 14th Amendment and Wong Kim Ark, is now genuinely being tested. We're in a new legal environment, clearly politically charged, and the very foundation is being questioned in ways we haven't seen before. As the source material noted, this really does have just enormous implications for what American identity even means.
It really does make you think, doesn't it? When you hear warnings about chaos, inequality, and fear, and you think about why the 14th Amendment was created in the first place, what could it actually mean for the country, for our sense of unity, if citizenship rules started becoming inconsistent from one state to the next? How might this whole legal fight end up reshaping fundamentally what it means to be an American citizen down the road? Something to keep an eye on, for sure. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Keep asking questions, stay curious, and stay engaged with the issues shaping our world.